Now we'll see the crude distillation. So in crude distillation, we are using the petroleum as a raw material in order to have the distillation, and then we can separate the components into it. So in step, it is a step 1 in the refining process where we can separate the crude oil into different fractions. So it is a separation of crude oil into various fractions or straight cuts by distillation in atmospheric and vacuum towers. The main fractions are cuts obtained have specific boiling point ranges and can be classified in order of decreasing volatility into gases, the high distillates, middle distillate, gas oils and residuum. So in this one, the two types of distillations we have, one is atmospheric distillation and other is vacuum distillation. So in atmospheric distillation, the desalted crude feedstock is preheated using recurrent process heat. The feedstock then flows to a direct fired crude charge heater, then into the vertical distillation column just above the bottom. At pressure slightly above the atmospheric and at temperatures ranging from 340 to 370 degrees centigrade, above these temperatures undesirable thermal cracking may occur. That means the degradation of the petroleum constituents, and that may result into the coke formation. So all but the heaviest fraction flash into vapor due to the heating, and as the hot vapor rises in the tower, its temperature is reduced. Heavy fuel oil or asphalt residue is taken from the bottom. At successively higher points on the tower, the various major products including lubricating oil, heating oil, kerosene, gasoline and unconsumed gases which condense at lower temperature are drawn off. So it is the diagram for the atmospheric distillation, where the crude oil, it is pumped to a desalter where the salt and other impurities will be removed out. Then in furnace it is heated and it is sent for the atmospheric fractionation. So from the bottom, the heavy crude oil or the residuum we will take out, and we can get the heavy gas oil, light gas oil, kerosene and heavy naphtha depend upon their boiling points. So the lower boiling point we will get at higher level, whereas the higher boiling point it is more tend to the bottoms. So the gas and the gasoline which comes out, so that is sent to the gas separator, and we get the gasoline, or we have what we can say the petrol and the gases then sent for the combustion purposes. Then simple crude distillation, if you say, then this will show the how the crude is distilled into the various fractions. So crude oil is desalted and then heated and is sent to the fractionating tower. So if we say the kerosene and the gas oil and the residue, we can separate out at different boiling ranges. So they are taken at the various streams, if you can say. So in this one, so in this the first thing we get is the gas oil, and the higher boiling range, or what say the lower boiling point, we can have the kerosene, and at the higher boiling we can have the kerosene. So we can say the lower boiling point mixture, so petrol being the lower boiling point, so it will come at the top, then kerosene will have the lower boiling point than the gasoline, we can take out from this stream, and then the gas oil being the more in boiling point than the kerosene, we can take from this one. So here we can reflux them and we can get the desired composition, and we can take on them at the different stream. And the last one, where the most of the residues or the higher molecular weight components which are present, then we can take them as a residue. So here we are generally using the fractionator to fractionate the components in the crude oil. In a vacuum distillation, the vacuum is used. So here to further distill the residuum or the top crude from the atmospheric tower without thermal cracking, and reduced pressure is required. So generally the atmospheric vacuum distillation, the problem which are occurring in atmosphere that is removed in vacuum distillation, generally the problem with thermal cracking means the degradation of the products. Then we have to do the distillation at reduced pressure. Also the component which may not get into the or which are not fractionated in atmospheric tower. So vacuum distillation is required in order to separate them. So the process takes place in one or more vacuum distillation towers. The principles of vacuum distillation resemble those of fractional distillation, except that larger diameter columns are used to maintain comparable vapor velocities at the reduced pressures. The internal designs of some vacuum towers are different from atmospheric towers in the random packing, and demister pads are used instead of trays. So some of the modifications done in the vacuum distillation, that to the atmospheric distillation. A typical first phase vacuum tower may produce gas oils, lubricating oil based stocks, and heavy residual for the propane deasphalting. The second phase tower operating at a lower vacuum may distill surplus residuum from the atmospheric tower, which is not used for lube stock processing, and surplus residuum from the first vacuum tower not used for deasphalting. Then the vacuum towers are typically used to separate catalytic cracking feedstock for surplus residuum. So here is a typical simple diagram for vacuum distillation. So it is sent to the vacuum tower where vacuum is maintained. Then we can get lower boiling point gas oil, and then we can have the lubricating oils which we can remove at a higher fraction. Then those are higher boiling point, they can removed as the vacuum residuum. Then in modern crude distillation, we can say here the crude oil is sent to the distillation tower, and we can have the recirculating refluxes. So these refluxes that are done for each of the separate crude oil. So the lower boiling point will get always at the top, whereas the higher boiling point we will take them from the bottom. So here you can say the reflux is occurring at the top, where the lower boiling point we are separating, so that is gasoline or gas will take, and from the higher boiling range it will go on. So we can have the kerosene at this stage, then we can have the light gas oil. So these different fractions, the main difference between them is the boiling point at which they are operating. So depend upon the boiling point and the boiling range, we can have the different fractions. So we have to keep in mind in the petroleum that these fractions which we are naming, so they will not have the definite boiling point, but it will have the boiling range. So within this boiling range, whatever the crude oil which we are getting, so that will be termed as that one. Like the gasoline, it will have some boiling range, or for kerosene will have some boiling range. And if you see the chemistry of the petroleum, then we can say they will have the different compositions. Like some will have the lower molecular weight, then straight chains or the branch chain. So depend upon the boiling range and the boiling quality of the mixture, we can have the different mixtures. And the chemistry, with the chemistry we can't separate them into kerosene or petrol, but we have to go for the boiling point, the key in which we can have the idea whether the coming fraction is a petroleum or a kerosene. So generally the analytical chemistry will tell you depend upon the composition of the petroleum, and we can have the petrol or the kerosene depend upon the fractions which we are getting. So next thing after distillation comes is propane deasphalting. So coke forming tendencies of heavier distillation products are reduced by removal of asphaltenic materials by solvent extraction. So asphalt, or we can say the higher molecular weight fractions, so that are removed by asphaltenic materials by solvent extraction. So solvent are used to remove the asphalt. So generally liquid propane is a good solvent which will have the butane pentane also. So propane can dissolve this one, and after that we can remove the asphalt from the propane by again the distillation. So deasphalting is based on solubility of hydrocarbons in propane. It means the type of molecule rather than the RMMS in distillation. Then vacuum residue is fed to the countercurrent disasphalting tower. Alkanes dissolve in propane, whereas asphaltening materials, aromatic compounds, the coke precursors do not. Then asphalt is sent for the thermal processing because it is also of the major important value. Then propane desalting is done in this one, where the crude oil after distillation is fed over here. Then it is sent, the propane is added to this, so propane will dissolve the asphalting, whereas the other components they won't. Then after dissolving, the propane is taken, and then propane after the distillation we can have the deasphalted oil. So in this one, by solvent extraction, just adding the propane where it is dissolved asphalt, we can separate oil and the dissolved asphalt in propane, and then we can remove propane by heating it, and we can have the deasphalted oil, and that we can send for the further thermal processes. The next process we have the solvent extraction and dewaxing. So solvent treating is widely used method of refining lubricating oils as well as host of other refinery stocks. And since distillation separates petroleum product into groups only by their boiling point reagents, impurities may remain in this. So this includes the organic compounds containing sulfur, nitrogen and oxygen, inorganic salts and dissolved metals, and soluble salts that were present in the crude feedstock. So the things which we can't separate by distillation, the solvent extraction may help in this one. So in addition, kerosene and distillates may have the trace amounts of aromatics and naphthalines, and lubricating oil based stocks may contain wax. So solvent refining processes including solvent extraction and solvent dewaxing usually remove this undesirable at intermediate refining stages or just before sending product to the stages. So solvent refining, including the solvent extraction. So we have to choose the solvent of the particular characteristics, then we can remove the contaminant in the crude oil, preferably in the solvent extraction. So dewaxing, then again to remove the waxes or the heavy molecular weight compounds from it, and solvent extraction to remove the components which can dissolve in the solvent. The purpose of solvent extraction is to prevent corrosion, protect catalyst in subsequent process, and improve finished product by removing unsaturated aromatic hydrocarbons from lubricant and grease stocks. The solvent extraction process separates aromatics, naphthalines, and impurities from product stream by dissolving or precipitation. The feedstock is first dried, then treated using a continuous countercurrent process treatment operation. So, countercurrent solvent treatment process, it will involve the liquid to be solvent extracted and the solvent, they will have the opposite direction to each other. Then if they have the same direction, then we will term as a co-current solvent extraction. So in one type of process, the feedstock is washed with a liquid in which the substances to be removed are more soluble than in the desired resultant product. In other process, selected solvents are added to cause impurities to precipitate out the product in the adsorption process. Then highly porous solvent material collect liquid molecules on their surfaces. The solvent is separated from the product stream by heating, evaporation or fractionation. The residual trace amounts are subsequently removed from raffinate by stream stripping or vacuum flashing. So when solvent dissolves some material to be separated, then solvent when they are separated, so solvent and dissolved material, so that we can separate by heating. Then solvent which we are get that will have the lower boiling point, or it may have the higher boiling point, where the dissolve may have the lower boiling point. So depend upon their boiling points, we can separate them. So the solvent we have to choose in such a way that it will not react with the extract, and also the separation of solvent and the material which is dissolved in the solvent to be separated easily. So in the solvent extraction, So electroporation may be used for separation of inorganic compounds. The solvent is degenerated for reuse in the process, and the most widely used extract solvent are the phenol, furfural, and the cresolic acid. The other solvent which may use as a liquid sulfur dioxide, nitrobenzene, and 2,2-dichloroethyl ether. The selection of specific processes and chemical agents depend on the nature of the feedstock being treated, the contamination present, and the finished product requirements. So it is a diagram for the aromatic solvent extraction unit, where we are taking the product in which we are adding the solvent, then it is properly mixed in the mixer. Then after mixing, there will be the component dissolved in solvent, and other is the component from which we have taken out the contaminants. So they will form the two different phases. So we can remove them separately in a settler, and from the settler the solvent with contaminants is removed. So that we can further remove by the heating operation. So feed is taken in a rotating this contactor. So rotating this contactor, it will add the solvent into it. So generally here we are using the furfural as a solvent. Then here it will be rotated, so we can have the proper mixing into this one. So raffinate and furfural, then we can have in the heater, and the raffinate solvent evaporated, where solvent evaporated, and the furfural which are getting we can send back to the tower. And extract solvent evaporated, where we can have the material which is not dissolving, and then we can have the extract, where the furfural which is again which is present in this in the less amount, that we can send again back to the tower. So generally here it should have the two phases. In one phase the material which is dissolved preferably, in other one the material dissolved is in less preference. So that becomes the key for the separation. So solvent extraction, so the main characteristics being the one is preferably dissolved, another is not. And then solvent we can remove easily just by heating the solvent, and that solvent we can reuse for the further solvent extraction. The solvent dewaxing is to remove wax from either distillate or residual based stock at any stage in the refining process. So there are several processes in use for solvent dewaxing, but all have the same general steps, which are mixing the feedstock with a solvent, precipitating the wax from the mixture by chilling, and recovering the solvent from the wax and dewax oil for recycling by distillation and steam stripping. Usually two solvents are used. One is toluene, which dissolves the oil and maintain fluidity at low temperatures, and methyl ethyl ketone MEK, which dissolves little wax at low temperatures and act as a wax precipitating agent. The other solvents sometimes used include benzene, methyl isobutyl ketone, propane, petroleum, naphtha, ethylene dichloride, methylene chloride, and other may be the sulfur dioxide. In addition, there is a catalytic process used as an alternate to solvent dewaxing. So here feed is taken, then heated, then it is passed to the heat exchanger and chiller. Then is passed to the slack wax evaporated. So we can have the two, one is dewax oil evaporator and the slack wax evaporated. So dewax oil evaporator, we can have the dewaxed oil, and from the slack wax evaporator we can have the stack wax, whereas the solvent will return to the mixer. So here the feed and the solvent is added, so wax is dissolved, then we can remove the wax by evaporating the solvent, whereas with the little quantity of solvent which comes in the dewax oil we can take separately, and from its solvent is again evaporated, we can send back to for the recovery, or we can send back to the wash solvent. So solvent dewaxing unit, here we have the waxy feeds to filters, then feed chilling section. So chilling is required because wax then will be solidified and it will be settled down. So then it is sent to the dewaxing filters. So dewaxing filters, it will have the different components, so that we can see in the diagram. And stack wax mix to wax recovery. Then it will pass to the membranes where the solid fire wax is removed and the solvent is sent back to the dewaxing filters. Then we can have the oil, which is dewax oil. So after solvent recovery we can have dewax oil, and the wax we can send for the further processing. Then blending is done. So blending is generally the mixing of the different components. So it is the physical mixture of number of different liquid hydrocarbons to produce a finished product with certain desired characteristics. So products can be blended in line through a manifold system or batch blended in tanks and vessels. Inline blending of gasoline, distillate, jet fuel and kerosene is accomplished by injecting proportionate amounts of each component into the mainstream, where the turbulence promotes thorough mixing. Then additives include octane enhancers, antioxidants, anti-knock agents, gum and rust inhibitors, detergents, etc. are added during and or after blending to provide specific properties not inherent in hydrocarbons. So hydrocarbons which are get like petrol, diesel or kerosene or naphtha, some additives need to be added in order to enhance the property of petroleum. So they may added during or they may after the refining process in the petroleum. The next one we will see the thermal processes. So in thermal processes, generally it will include the pyrolysis. So when a hydrocarbon is heated to sufficiently high temperature, thermal cracking occurs. This is sometimes referred to as pyrolysis, especially when coal is the feedstock. When steam is used, then it is called as steam cracking. We will examine two thermal processes used in the refinery. One is whiz breaking and other is delayed coking. So pyrolysis, which will say the cracking of the component or the breaking of the components, so that may lead to the coke formation. So here one may occur in present absence of the oxygen, and it will make the higher molecule into lower molecular weight. So we will see the whiz breaking and delayed coking in the thermal processes. So whiz breaking, it will relate to the mild form of the thermal cracking that lowers the viscosity of heavy crude oil residues without affecting the boiling point range. So we have to cut the components into lower molecular weight. The residuum from the atmospheric distillation tower is heated around 425 to 510 degrees centigrade at atmospheric pressure and mildly crack in the heater to make it lower viscous without changing the boiling range. It is then quenched with cool gas oil to control over cracking and flash in distillation tower. So whiz breaking is used to reduce the pour point of waxy residues and reduce the viscosity of residues used for blending with lighter flavor ice. Middle distillates may also be produced depending on the fluid demand. The pour point will refer to the point where liquid gets its fluidity to flow. So the point or the temperature at which it gets just fluidity, so that point will be referred as pour point. The thermally cracked residue tar, which accumulates in the bottom of the fractionation tower, is vacuum flashed in a stripper and the distillate delayed. So here the feed is taken to furnace, then it is sent to the soaker. So it will have the internal for reducing bag mixing, and it is sent to the fractionator where it will be fractionated into the lower compounds to improve the pour point and the lessen the viscosity. Then we can separate the gas or gasoline. Then we can quench for the limited cracking of the given petroleum crude product. So alternatively, the vacuum residue can be cracked. The severity of the whiz breaking depends upon temperature and reaction time. Generally, it is 1 to 8 minutes. Usually, less than 8% of gasoline and lighter products are produced. So here, the vacuum residue, then it is sent to the reactor. Then it is flashed. So in flashed one, the higher boiling and lower point, they will be separated. So the fractionator, it will separate them into the light gas oil and the heavy gas oil. Whereas we can get the cracked one residue from the bottoms, and from the top we can have the heavy gas oil. So next thermal process comes is the delayed coking. So coking is the severe method of thermal cracking used to upgrade heavy residues into lighter products of distillate. Coking produces straight run gasoline, that is called coker, naphtha, and various middle distillate fractions used as catalytic cracking feedstock. The process completely reduces hydrogen, so that residue is a form of carbon called coke. Three typical types of coke are obtained, like sponge coke, honeycomb coke, and needle coke, depend upon the reaction mechanism, time, temperature, and the crude feedstock. The delayed coking, the heated charge, typically residuum from atmospheric distillation tower, is transferred to large coke drums, which provide the long residence time needed to allow the cracking reaction to produce completion. So delayed cracking, so it is the method to upgrade the heavy residues into the lighter products of distillates. So when we have the lighter distillates, then we can have the lower boiling point, and lower boiling point will result in the product for the lower viscosity. Also the pour point also it is changed. So here is the picture that will show the sponge cake derived from petroleum feedstock that showed abundant pore structure. They note that the flow structure in the coke cells walls. So here you can see the walls like vacuoles present in the bacteria. They are present over here. The typical needle coke derived from a petroleum feedstock. The parallel layers and linear fractures are distinctive and provide slip length relief stress in coke. So needle coke, the name itself says it is like the needle one. It is the horizontal, or we can have the vertical planes. So they are distinct and provide the slip planes to relieve stresses in the coke. Then delayed coking is done, so heavy feedstock is fed to the fractionator. The bottoms of the fractionator are fed to coker drums via furnace, where the hot material around 440 to 500 degrees centigrade is held approximately 24 hours. So time is taken, that's why it's called as delayed, or at a very slowly at a pressures of 2 to 5 bar until it cracks into the lighter products. So vapor from drums are returned to the fractionator, where gas, naphtha, and gas oil are separated out. The heavier hydrocarbons produced in the fractionator are recycled through the furnace. After the coke reaches a predetermined level in one drum, the flow is diverted to another drum to maintain continuous operation. The full drum is steamed to strip out uncracked hydrocarbons and cooled by water injection and de-coke by mechanical or hydraulic methods. Then the coke is mechanically removed by auger rising from the bottom of the drum. The hydraulic de-coking consists of fracturing the coke bed with high pressure water ejected from the rotating cutter. So here the delayed coking. So in this one the heavy feedstock is heated very slowly. So as it is heated very slowly, the higher molecular weight may separate into the lighter components, and that's why it is called a delayed coking. So it is done to improve the characteristics of the heavy crude oil. So here feed is taken to the fractionator. Then fractionator we can have the gas oil and the unstabilized naphtha. So depend upon the pressure and the temperature, it will be delayed, and the heavy molecular weight coke will be degraded into the lower molecular weight, and that we can separate out as the various product stream. Then we'll have the catalytic processes for the petroleum refining. So catalytic process will use the catalyst as the main material in order to crack it. So one of the things we have discussed already in fluid mechanics lab, that is fluidized bed. So here we will discuss about the fluid catalytic cracking. Then we have the hydrotreating, hydrocracking, and catalytic reforming. Then we have the alkylation. So in the crude oil, after distillation unit, we have the gases, straight gas, gasoline, naphtha, kerosene, gas oil, atmospheric residue. So the boiling rate is given over here. So fuel application is also given. So generally diesel is used for the transportation, it may be power station, and some of them is for the various purposes. Then hydrocarbons which we have here, then we have the octane number. So octane number is the number which will tell what is the characteristics of the petroleum that we are using. So octane number is one of the characteristics of the petroleum. So generally we will have some definite octane number. So octane number is necessary in avoid the cracking sound in the engine. So these are the products which need to be manufactured. So catalytic cracking is necessary in order to produce those products for the greater achievement. So main incentive for catalytic cracking is need to increase gasoline production. So the product which are shown, the main of them was the petrol or the gasoline. So generally gasoline which will have the lower boiling point means the lower molecular weight products, and when we have the heavy crude oil, then we have to degrade them into the lower molecular weight, so they will have the lower boiling range. That in terms we can have the gasoline. So feedstock are typically vacuum gas oil, and cracking is catalyzed by solid acid which promotes the rupture of CC bond, the crucial intermediate are carbocations, that positively charged hydrocarbons, ions formed by the action of the acid size on the catalyst. Besides carbon-carbon cleavage, many other reactions occur like isomerization, then protonation and deprotonation, alkylation, polymerization, cyclization and condensation. So catalytic cracking comprises a complex network of reactions both intramolecular and intermolecular. The formation of coke is an essential feature of the cracking process, and this coke deactivates the catalyst. So deactivation of the catalyst means catalyst sites are no longer for the reaction. And catalytic cracking is one of the largest applications of catalysts. Worldwide cracking capacity exceeds 500 million tons per annum. Catalytic cracking was the first large-scale application of fluidized bed, which explains the name fluid catalytic cracking, or we can say the FCC. Nowadays, in-train flow reactors are used instead of fluidized bed, but the name FCC is still retained because of the process. So now we'll see how the FCC as the fluidized catalytic cracking works. So oil is cracked in the presence of finely divided catalyst, which is maintained in an aerated or fluidized state by the oil vapors. The fluid cracker consists of catalyst section and a fractionating section that operate together as an integrated processing unit. The catalyst section contains the reactor and regenerator, with which the standpipe and riser from the catalyst circulation unit. A fluid catalyst is continuously circulated between reactor and the regenerator using air, oil vapors and steam for the conveying media. Then preheated feed is mixed with hot regenerated catalyst in the riser and combined with a recycled stream, vaporized and raised to external temperature by the hot catalyst. As the mixture towers up riser, the charge is cracked at 0.7 to 2 bar pressure. The modern FCC unit solve cracking takes place in the riser. The reactor merely serves as holding vessel for the cyclones. Crack product is then charged to a fractionating column where it is separated into fraction, and some of the heavy oil is recycled to the riser. So here generally what is done, the catalyst which is in form of the lighter particles, it will be circulating and the temperature and the pressure is maintained. So as the steam rises, so heavy crude oil will be cracked down and we can have the lower molecular weight. In cyclone separated catalyst and the gas will be separated out, and the catalyst is again available for the reaction. So spent catalyst is regenerated to get rid of coke that collects on the catalyst during the process. Spent catalyst flows to the catalyst stripper to the regenerator where most of the coke deposits burn off at the bottom, where preheated air and spent catalyst are mixed. The fresh catalyst added and worn out catalyst removed to optimize the cracking process. So this is the general diagram for the FCC. So here you can see the air and air which is coming, which makes the catalyst moving. Then feed is added. So upwards we can have the cyclone separator. So temperature and pressure maintained over here. So here the fluidized will be in a fluidized form. So when the fluid is moving up, so when fluid is moving up, it will be cracked, and we can have the gas and the catalyst particles. So gas we can separate down in cyclone separator, and the catalyst we can send it back. So here the riser, it will rise the fluidized bed. The cracking will take place, and then cyclone will separate the gas and the catalyst. So catalyst we can again send to the other separator. So it is a two-stage catalytic process. So we can see the two FCC units over here. So in this pipe it will be rise, and from the other side pipes the catalyst will be collected, and whereas the air will move up and it will be cracked one, so it is sent to the fractionator. So FCC shows the improved efficiency in the catalytic cracking technology. So here raw oil charge, it will send to the catalytic cracking, where it will be cracked. So regenerator will regenerate the catalyst that we can use again. Then the gases which are separated in cyclone, so that will come here in fractionator. So fractionator will fractionate the gas, that is C4 plus lighter, then gasoline, then light gas oil, and the heavy gas oils. And the regenerator will regenerate the catalyst, which will again send to the reactor separation vessels, where the catalytic cracking will takes place.